thank you very much for the opportunity to talk today.
Yeah, thank you for being with us, Gordon. You're also a member of our advisory board, so it's a real pleasure to have you. So there are many definitions about impact investing in private markets. From your experience, what will be the best definition one could use?
Well, you can define it in opposition, say, to public markets, which is basically portfolio investing for traded securities where every holder is in effect anonymous in many respects. Private markets, I understand to be basically agreements between investors in relation to their common objectives over short to medium to long term. Private markets mean that you are embedded in those relationships, difficult, probably correctly, to exit. And at the same time, if there is collaboration and commitment by the parties to the private investment strategy, then I think it's more likely to be long-term than short-term. So the essence of a private market is not traded, long-term commitment or longer-term commitment, shared responsibilities and shared commitments, and a sense of what the destination might look like without sort of presupposing that everyone has a crystal ball who knows that. So that's how I understand a private market. What was the second part of the question?
The impact part. So what defines impact in private markets?
I think in lots of ways, private markets and private commitments in the way I just described it are better able to realize impact than public markets.
Right.
By impact, I mean it in the sense that you realize a rate of return, you do the investment for the return, but also the subsidiary positive benefits either side of those commitments. Now, most investors are there in the first instance for the rate of return over the long term, in particular in private markets, but many of those parties going into private commitments are doing so because it's a shared sense of purpose over and above basically realizing a profit for either an investor or stakeholder. So that's how I kind of see the impact side of things.
Okay. And from your experience, Gordon, as a trustee, if one would propose to you, say, an impact-related investment in private markets, say in private equity, what would be, from a trustee perspective, say, the key questions, say the key 3 questions you would be asking?
If I was a trustee
in a pension fund
in relation to public markets or to private markets?
To private markets.
To private markets. I think due diligence for a trustee is really important in this space. Of course, you would have an advisor, that is a investment consultant, who would give you insight into it. But if you're going into partnership, in effect, with other investors for a long-term commitment, I would want to know something about each and every of those investment groups, what their goals and objectives are, such that we were aligned from the get-go. Now, that doesn't mean to say over the longer term alignment might need hold, but I'd like transparency between the parties to the investment program such that I understood when decisions are made, I understood actually the motivations behind the commitments being made. So transparency is important. Yeah. Longer term commitment is important. Demonstrable commitment is important, but also being able together rework the investment if need be in a way that respects mutual interests, which is not to say the interests need be the same, but there must be transparency with respect to the interests and a capacity, if you like, to negotiate a way through when you face risk and uncertainty.
Right. Would there be additional questions you would be asking because there's an impact element in the mandate? So it's not just about financial returns, but also about impact-related returns, either to do good in the social space or climate-related, etc.
Yeah, sure. I encounter a lot of people who talk about impact,
Mm.
and it's rather trivial,
Mm.
or it's well-meaning without actually substantive commitment for a particular outcome. So I would really want to know something about actually what we're trying to do, at the same time realizing a rate of return that's consistent with our longer term interests. And I would want, if you like, to have some advice about that. I'd want to also have some metrics that I could actually use to justify, if you like, what the journey is, what is the planned process of realizing both the rate of return and a desirable impact. Do I think that are the two things synonymous? They're not. Obviously, you can be in a private market situation and not ever talk about impact.
Mm.
So when you join an impact investing private market group, you'd have to be sure that our interests were aligned and we understood what we meant by impact as to the enterprise. And so that again means transparency and basically a willingness to negotiate and discuss these issues over the longer term.
If you look at the current world, many things are changing. At the moment, it's do you feel we needed to, as end investors, as institutions like pension funds, reassess kind of what we mean with impact, to reassess the intent we have? Example, investing in weapons, or
yeah, let's take your first question. Reassessing what we mean by impact. I think in a strange way, impact was captured by the ESG process. ESG has its own pathway, or rather role to play, but unfortunately, ESG absorbed a lot of the energy that might have been more explicitly about long-term impact. And indeed, there's been a bit of a false assumption that investing in ESG terms is about impact in the long term, whereas actually it's really about portfolio management and pardon me, portfolio management and taking in fact it's basically factor investing in the short term, if you in large part. So carving out the space for impact investing separate from ESG is going to be very, very important. And we need best practice models. We need ways of doing so that basically have internal integrity, but also can be explained to political critics who might otherwise sort of say, you're just like ESG, you're just like, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to have to think very carefully about how we talk about impact investing, distinguishing between short-term ESG factor investing and basically telling the story about long-term commitments. We are often privileged, though, as organizations, because we genuinely do have long time horizons to basically justify the issues or justify the process of impact investing, in part because through our own investments, we don't want to create negative externalities, which in the longer term basically blows up the whole system.
Okay. You were talking about alignment of interests, which is particularly important in private markets. And would you be in favor of including impact-related KPIs in performance fees for managers next to the traditional financial KPIs?
Possibly. I've not encountered many investment groups that are good at it. It's to say, yeah, possibly. I'd like to see somebody who was really good at it. For example, my own fund at Oxford is invested in wind farms.
Right.
In the Baltic, not in the Baltic, in the North Sea. And we've been in that for quite a long time. that has many virtues, not just the rate of return. Do we capture in a metric basis the positive externalities? Not really, but we are knowledgeable of them in the terms of actually climate change and the like. So not everything needs to be invested, or rather needs to be measured. But if you've got a private market impact investing group, I think you're going to have to be transparent with one another about what you're measuring for what purpose. That's the best I can do.
Yeah, thanks, Gordon.